Hey there, night dwellers. Welcome back to Nightmare Frequency. Before we descend into tonight's chilling tale, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, get cozy, and prepare yourself for another journey into the unknown.
You might not believe in spirits or haunted houses, the voice began, but this story comes from someone who didn't either until he rented a room in a house that should have never existed. Alex smiled to himself. He'd heard 100 of these. Fun stories, good suspense, a little chill and sleep. That was the goal. That's what the voice promised every night. Scare you to sleep. The story unfolded, told by a man named Lucas. He was a traveling nurse, the podcast said, someone who moved from town to town on contract. He'd booked a room in a Victorian home outside New Haven, Connecticut, just a temporary stop during a 3-month contract. It was weird from the start, Lucas said. I booked it on one of those home rental sites. The listing said, private room in historical home, long-term only. It didn't have many reviews, just one actually. And it just said, do not stay here alone. Alex shifted in his seat. Classic setup. Lucas continued. When I got there, the house looked wrong. Like it was old, sure, but not run down. Just frozen. Like no one had lived in it for decades, even though the owner, some guy named Howard, greeted me like everything was normal. Alex let out a quiet laugh. Here we go, he muttered. The voice deepened. Howard showed me to my room at the top of the stairs, third door on the right. It was clean, neat. But the air was stale, like the room hadn't been opened in years. I unpacked, settled in, and that night I heard footsteps. Not soft ones, heavy, booted, like someone pacing just outside my room. Lucas claimed he opened the door several times. No one was ever there. By the third night, I was exhausted. Every night at exactly 2:12 a.m., I'd hear it. Steps, and then a knock. 3 knocks. I tried recording it, but the file would always be corrupted, or worse, blank, like nothing had happened. But I was awake. I was always awake. Alex sipped his tea, now lukewarm. The voice of the podcast was steady, emotionless, but the story started to affect him. He looked at the hallway outside his own living room. Still, quiet, too quiet. Then came the 6th night, Lucas said. I opened the door just as the knocking started. This time I saw it. The voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't Howard. It wasn't anyone I could describe as human. It stood there, tall, draped in what looked like wet burlap. Its face was just a sheet of raw, twisted skin, no features, only something pulsing under it. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just tapped the doorframe with one finger, a black, rotten nail clicking against the wood. I slammed the door. I moved a dresser in front of it, and I swear to you, it didn't stop. It kept tapping. All night. Alex's skin prickled. He glanced at the hallway again. Shadows stretched oddly now, twisted by the soft lamp beside him. On the final night, I heard Howard shouting upstairs, screaming, like someone was killing him. I ran out of my room and saw him halfway up the attic steps. He looked at me with these huge, wild eyes and screamed, "It knows your name now!" Then he disappeared into the attic. I never saw Howard again. I packed and left before sunrise. When I tried to leave a review on the rental site, the listing was gone, like it had never existed. The story ended with the usual disclaimer, based on a true story submitted anonymously. Alex exhaled and let himself relax again. Silly, creepy fun. Nothing real. Then 3 knocks came from his front door. Not loud, not rushed, but heavy. Knock, knock, knock. Alex froze. He looked at the clock. 2:12 a.m. He stood, every muscle tight. Maybe a prank, a drunk neighbor. But he lived in a secluded cul-de-sac. Nobody came by unannounced. Especially not at that hour. The knocks came again. Louder. Knock, knock, knock. He swallowed hard and walked to the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. Slowly, cautiously, he peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty porch bathed in a weak orange glow from the overhead light. But when he turned around, he saw the shape at the end of the hallway. Tall, unmoving, wrapped in something dark and coarse. It stood with one hand raised, the finger still tapping, not on a doorframe, but on the wall. Alex didn't breathe. Couldn't. The shape took a step forward. The sound was unnatural, like wet burlap dragging over broken glass. Alex backed into the kitchen, knocking over a chair. It crashed loudly, and when he looked again, the hallway was empty. No shape, no sound, nothing. He laughed nervously, rubbing his face. Too much tea, too much late-night creepiness. He went to grab his phone, intending to call someone, anyone, but the screen was dead. Not off. Just black. He pressed buttons. Nothing. Not even a flicker. When he tried to turn on the kitchen light, it fizzled and popped. Every bulb in the house went dark, one by one, as if something moved room to room, killing power as it passed. Panic welled in his chest. Then came a soft voice. Not from the podcast, not from his own thoughts. It came from behind him. You heard it too. Alex spun. A figure stood in his living room now. Not the burlap shape. This was a man, mid-30s, eyes sunken, skin pale. The man from the story. Lucas. I didn't tell them everything, he said. They wouldn't have believed it. They cut the end off, the part where I said it follows. If you hear the story, it finds you. That's how it spreads. Not through blood or rituals, just through listening. Alex backed away. This is a dream, he whispered, or a trick. Lucas didn't move. I tried to warn them. I tried deleting the submission, but it was too late. People kept listening, and now it's loose. From the darkness behind Lucas, something emerged. The thing! Its skin pulsed like a bag of meat, its limbs too long and bent at the wrong angles. It crawled like a spider on twisted elbows, no eyes, just folds of wet, groaning flesh. You need to pass it on, Lucas whispered, the only way, before it stays, before it becomes part of you. Alex screamed. He ran out the back door, across the lawn, barefoot, not caring about thorns or cold. He ran until dawn, until the sun painted the horizon with desperate pink and yellow. He collapsed in the woods, gasping, heart nearly broken from terror. The police found him hours later, shaking, speaking nonsense. They took him to a hospital. He didn't speak for 3 days. Then finally, he asked for a phone, and he made a submission to the same podcast. My name is Alex, he began, and I have a true story to tell you. Please listen carefully, because if you don't listen, if you don't let it in, it stays with me, and I can't take it anymore.
Story number 2.
The wind howled through the trees like a scream being carried on the edge of the world. In the middle of nowhere, under a sky too dark to be called night, a rusted blue truck rumbled up a narrow dirt road. Inside, Sarah drove with white knuckles, the steering wheel slick beneath her trembling hands. Her sister, Lila, sat beside her, chewing her lip until it bled. Almost there, Sarah muttered. It's just ahead. You said that 10 minutes ago, Lila whispered. I meant it this time. They were looking for a house, an old cabin actually, hidden deep in the forests of Appalachia. It belonged to their grandmother, a woman who had died long before they were born. Their mother had never spoken of her, except once, when she was drunk and shaking, muttering about the darkness in the hills. She'd warned them never to go near that land. So, of course, they went. The cabin appeared like something dredged up from a memory, hunched between trees, its porch caved in and its windows blind with grime. The woods around it stood still, dead silent, as though waiting. As Sarah turned off the engine, Lila whispered, "Why does it feel like it's watching us?" Sarah didn't answer. She just got out of the truck, her boots crunching on frost-covered leaves. Lila followed reluctantly. They stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under their weight. Sarah reached for the door, found it unlocked, and pushed it open with a squeal that cut through the silence like a scream. Inside, the air was cold and wet. The walls dripped with moisture, though there hadn't been any rain. Dust hung in the air like ash. A single armchair faced the fireplace, and next to it, a faded photograph sat on a crooked table. It showed 3 women. One of them was unmistakably their mother. The other was a younger version of their grandmother. The third woman was tall, long-faced, eyes scratched out with something sharp. "Who is that?" Lila asked, voice cracking. "I don't know," Sarah said. "Let's just get what we came for." They climbed the stairs to the attic. Their mother had once told them in a moment of half-sleep that something was hidden there, something buried in the walls. As they reached the top, they heard it, the faint sound of breathing. But there was no one there, only shadows that felt too thick, too alive. In the attic, they found the wall their mother spoke of, a section of boards that didn't match the rest. Sarah pried them away with an old crowbar. Behind it, they found a cavity. Inside, wrapped in rotting cloth, was a bundle of bones and hair and broken dolls, and a diary. Sarah opened it. The pages were soaked with something dark, but one entry stood out, written in a spidery hand. "She is not our mother. She came from the mountain. She wore our mother's face. She taught us to sing songs we didn't know we knew. She fed us things we didn't want to eat. She watches in the mirror when we sleep. She whispers in the walls. She is not our mother. The pages after that were torn, but the final one had a single phrase scrawled across it. Don't stay past sundown. They heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, deliberate. Lila clutched Sarah's arm. Who else is here? No one, Sarah whispered. It's just us, right? They crept back downstairs. The front door was shut now, locked. They hadn't locked it. And now, something stood in front of the fireplace. At first, they thought it was a coat rack until it turned its head. The thing had no face, just skin stretched tight like an old drum, but it wore their mother's dress, the same one she was buried in. Lila screamed. Sarah grabbed her and ran for the back door, but it was gone. Just wall now, like it had never existed. The lights flickered. Then came the voice. Not spoken, but whispered from inside their heads. You should not have come back. You carry her blood, and blood remembers. The shadows moved now, crawling up the walls, across the ceiling, slick and oily and wrong. One of them slithered down and coiled around Sarah's ankle. She kicked it, but it didn't move like a shadow should. It stuck. Heavy. Real. They bolted up the stairs again. The attic. The hole in the wall. Maybe they could hide. But as they reached the top, they saw it, a mirror. Tall, covered in a cloth. Drawn to it against their will, Sarah yanked the cloth off. What she saw made her fall to her knees. It wasn't a reflection. It was a room. Another room. Identical to theirs, but wrong. In it stood their mother, except her eyes were black holes and her mouth was sewn shut with thread. Behind her, something shifted. A tall figure stepped into the mirror room, the long-faced woman from the photograph. Her mouth opened. No sound came out, but in the real room, they heard a scream. Sarah tried to smash the mirror, but her fist stopped an inch from the glass, frozen in the air. Lila grabbed the diary, flipping back to the first page. Something had bled through the parchment. A message appeared. To leave, you must forget. What does that mean? Lila cried. Sarah looked up. The shadows were in the attic now, crawling toward them like a living wave. She turned to Lila. We have to forget, Mom. We have to forget this place. We have to let it go. I can't. If we don't, it keeps us. That's what it wants. Lila was sobbing now, hands over her ears. The mirror began to ripple like water. The long-faced woman reached out. Her hands passed through the glass. Sarah stared into her void black eyes and said, I don't remember. Instantly, the shadows shrieked. A wail of rage filled the cabin. The mirror shattered. The woman disappeared. The air cleared. Lila opened her eyes. Where? Where are we? They stood in a crumbling attic, daylight pouring through a broken roof. The mirror was gone. The photograph was gone. The bones. The diary. Everything. They left the house. They never spoke of it again. But Sarah sometimes wakes in the middle of the night, sweating, unsure where she is. And on the wind, when it's quiet enough, she hears a voice, a whisper. You forgot me, but I never forget.
Story number 3.
The room was dim, the single bulb overhead flickering with a low, tired buzz. A man sat in a metal chair, bound at the wrists and ankles with frayed rope. Blood had dried along the side of his face, and his lip was split. His name was Tom Bishop, and he was a priest. Across from him sat a woman with eyes like carved obsidian, and a voice that seemed to vibrate beneath your skin. Tell me again, she said, slowly circling him. From the beginning. Tom's breath trembled. You don't understand. You can't understand. I understand. Some things aren't meant to be said out loud. The woman stopped. Her lips curled into something like a smile. Say it anyway. Tom closed his eyes, and the memories came, unwelcome and vivid. 2 weeks earlier, he had received a letter. No return address, no postage, just slid under his door in the dead of night. It read, Come to St. Thaddeus. It has begun again. He knew the name. St. Thaddeus Orphanage, closed since 1991 after a fire took the lives of 6 children and the headmistress. A tragedy ruled accidental, but Tom had been there before, decades ago. He was just a seminary student then, doing volunteer work, teaching scripture to the boys. He remembered one child in particular, Nathan. Quiet, pale, obsessed with mirrors. Nathan was the first to die, and Tom had always suspected it wasn't the fire that killed him. He found the place buried in the woods, nearly reclaimed by ivy and rot. The door groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a corridor filled with mold and silence. But the second he stepped in, the air changed. He could feel it, watching. Inside, the orphanage hadn't changed. Dust lay thick, but the furniture remained. Toys, beds, even a crucifix on the wall, upside down, its wood blackened as if burned. He walked the halls, flashlights sweeping past rooms full of decay and silence. Then he saw the first sign of something wrong. A child's handprint, smeared in what looked like ash, on a window high above his head, and then another and another. They led him down to the basement, to the playroom. The walls were covered in drawings, hundreds of them. Stick figures with hollow eyes, dark shapes standing behind them, words scrawled over and over in a child's handwriting. She lives in the glass. She speaks through the cracks. We belong to her now. That's when he heard it, laughter, high-pitched, joyous, echoing off the walls like it didn't belong in the world anymore. He turned and saw the mirror. Standing alone in the center of the room, full length, untouched by dust or age, and in the reflection children stood, all of them facing the glass. And in the center stood a woman, dressed in black, her face long and featureless, just smooth skin where her eyes and mouth should be, yet still she smiled, and then the children turned toward him. The mirror shattered. Tom had awoken in the church's back room, shaking, cross clutched so tightly it had embedded into his skin. He tried to warn the diocese, but they didn't believe him. Delirium, they said, a waking dream. But he kept seeing her. In reflections, in puddles, in windows. And then the children started dying again. 3 in 3 days. All of them from families who had adopted or fostered from St. Thaddeus in the late 80s. One boy was found drowned in an empty bathtub. Another was discovered curled in a closet, mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes turned to glass. The third had simply vanished. His mirror, however, was cracked from the inside. So Tom returned to the orphanage, this time with holy water, prayers, salt. Every rite he could remember, and he faced her. The lady behind the glass. She did not speak with words. She used voices of the children, of Nathan, of his own mother, whispering doubts, spinning fear like thread. You left us here, they said. You forgot. We were cold. We were scared. Now you belong to her too. Now you belong to exorcise her. But she laughed. She laughed. That sound, it wasn't human. He smashed the mirror, and for a moment he thought it was over. Until he woke here, tied, beaten, the woman across from him listening. She wore a priest's collar, but her eyes weren't human, not anymore. You didn't stop it, she said, crouching to look him in the face. You only set it loose. Tom struggled against the rope. You're one of hers. I'm more than that, she whispered. I'm her voice. The lights flickered. A mirror on the wall behind her rippled like water, and they came through. Children with mouths sewn shut and eyes bleeding black, smiling, reaching. The woman stepped aside, arms wide, welcoming them. Tom screamed, wrenching himself free, knocking over the chair. He ran, bolting through the door into a hallway that made no sense. Longer than it should be, shifting like it was alive. He passed mirrors that showed him things that couldn't be. His own body hanging upside down, a version of himself laughing, skin peeling from his face. His childhood room with something huge crawling across the ceiling. He didn't stop, not until he slammed into a door and burst outside into cold air, collapsing on the wet grass, gasping. The building behind him was gone. Just trees. Just night. He didn't remember walking there, didn't remember how it began. But when he stood and looked into the puddle at his feet, he saw her, smiling, behind his eyes, waiting. That was 3 days ago. He hasn't slept since. He doesn't look in mirrors, and everywhere he goes, children seem to follow him. Quiet, pale, watching. He says it won't stop. That she moves now, free from the orphanage, slipping through reflections, recruiting, and that the only way to be safe is to never look too long, never look behind you, because she doesn't knock. She doesn't speak. She just smiles.
Story number 4.
The sky bled orange as the sun sank behind the tree line, casting long shadows across the marshland. Sheriff Mike Hanley stood at the edge of the swamp, staring into the still, dark water. It had been almost a week since the Rusk boy disappeared. No footprints, no signs of a struggle. Just his boots sitting neatly beside the dock, and the family dog found days later, half mad, foaming, and blind in both eyes. Locals whispered about the swamp like it was alive. Stories passed from porch to porch, never written down. They called it Black Hollow. They said it kept things. Mike never listened, until now. He lit a cigarette, hands trembling. The air smelled like rot and rain. A bullfrog croaked somewhere in the reeds, then went silent mid-call. Mike turned. Nothing. Just the endless hush of the marsh. Behind him, his deputy, Nora, checked her shotgun for the 5th time. You hear that? She asked. No. Exactly. The swamp was never quiet. They made their way deeper into the mire. Trees hung low, heavy with moss that dripped like cobwebs. Every now and then, Mike thought he saw shapes moving in the corners of his vision, too tall to be deer, too silent to be human. After an hour, they came upon it. A shack, half sunken into the marsh, tilted like a crooked smile. Boards warped and sagging, vines clung to its sides like veins. No one had lived there in 40 years. Mike stepped onto the porch, gun drawn. "Rusk?" he called. "Anybody here?" No answer. Just the sound of wood creaking under his boots and the whisper of something slipping through the water behind him. Inside, it smelled of mildew and iron. A single chair sat in the center of the room, facing a mirror nailed to the far wall. The mirror was clean. Too clean. In it, Mike saw Nora enter behind him, but something about her reflection was wrong. It moved just a half second too late. He blinked. The reflection was normal again. "Don't like this," Nora muttered. "Feels like we're being watched." "We are," Mike said, and didn't know why he believed it so absolutely. They turned to leave. That's when they heard the laughter. High, reedy, guttural. It came from the mirror. They spun. The surface rippled. The reflection of the shack was gone, replaced by a room filled with standing water and people. Dozens of them, their skin pale, bloated, eyes rolled white. All of them staring at the chair in the center, where something sat. It was tall, its limbs too long, head cocked like it didn't understand the shape of its own body. It didn't move, but its reflection leaned forward. A voice rasped through the shack, "Bring him back." Then the mirror shattered, and the house began to scream. It wasn't a sound, not really. It was inside their heads, vibrating behind their eyes. Mike grabbed Nora's hand and ran, stumbling into the marsh, chest tight with panic. The sky had turned red. Not sunset red. Blood red. They didn't remember the path they'd taken. The swamp felt endless now, stretching in all directions. Behind them, something followed. They couldn't see it, but they felt it. The weight of a gaze that dug into your spine. Nora tripped and fell into the water. Mike turned to help her, and froze. Something was rising from the swamp behind her. A face. Long. Smooth. No mouth. Just hollow eyes and skin stretched tight. It reached for her. Mike fired his gun, but the sound was swallowed by the swamp. He pulled her free, and they ran. They didn't stop until they saw lights. Flickering lanterns set up by search crews near the tree line. Men shouting. Flashlights. When they stumbled out, covered in filth and shaking, the search team surrounded them. Mike turned to Nora, trying to speak, but she didn't speak back because her mouth was gone. Just skin. Smooth and pale. They took her to the hospital. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just sat quietly, staring into her reflection in the window. She never blinked. 3 days later, she disappeared from her room. Only thing left behind was a single handprint, wet, on the inside of the mirror. Mike quit the force that week, moved out of town. He doesn't sleep much, and he hasn't looked into a mirror since. He knows what he'll see if he does. The shack, the thing in the chair, and himself, already sitting next to it, smiling.
Story number 5.
It was a forgotten town, the kind you only hear about in gas station rumors or whispered road trip warnings. Pine Hollow. Population, 317, according to the rusted sign half buried in weeds. It hadn't changed in decades. The buildings sagged with rot, and the streetlights buzzed like they were straining to stay alive. But there were no people, no cars, no movement. Just silence and heat that pressed on your chest like a stone. Mara was just passing through. GPS had rerouted her after a highway crash left her stranded 2 hours off course. She figured Pine Hollow might have a phone, a diner, something. She didn't plan on staying. Not once she realized the gas station had no pumps, the market had no doors, and the houses had no windows, just hollow frames of buildings pretending to be alive. She should have turned around then, but the sun was already falling and her phone had gone dead, so she parked beside a cracked sidewalk and walked. That's when she saw the boy. He stood in the middle of the road, barefoot, shirtless. His skin looked gray, not dirty, not bruised, just wrong. He pointed at her, then turned and ran between two houses. "Hey!" she called. "Kid, are you okay?" She followed. Bad choice. The alley was darker than it should have been, cold, like it belonged to a different season, and at the end of it she saw the tree. It stood behind the houses, tall and black, like it had been burned down to its bones but never fallen. The boy stood beneath it, facing away. "Are you lost?" she asked, softer now. He turned. His mouth was sewn shut. Mara screamed, and then the world blinked. She was back in her car, engine off, hands shaking. It was night, and the streetlights were out. Only the moon lit the town now. If it was a moon, it was too low, too red, it throbbed. She locked her doors, tried the ignition. Dead. All around her, the buildings began to hum, a low, vibrating sound like chanting through teeth. Then she saw them. In every windowless frame, people stood, watching, their faces blank, their eyes too wide, dozens of them, all the same gray color as the boy. All silent, except their mouths moved, repeating something. Mara couldn't hear it, until she looked in the rearview mirror. There, written in the fogged glass, was a phrase, "Say it with us." Her ears popped. Then the sound came rushing in. Voices, all around her, whispering, "Feed the hollow, feed the hollow." She scrambled out of the car and ran, tearing through the street, past broken buildings and empty yards. She didn't care where, just away. But Pine Hollow didn't work like other places. Every turn led her back to the tree. Now it loomed taller. Its bark pulsed like a vein. At its base, the boy waited. He opened his sewn mouth without tearing the stitches. A voice spilled out that wasn't his. "You came alone. Just like the last, just like the next. You are the story now." Mara backed away. But the crowd was there now, surrounding her. Faces with no features. Eyes like holes burned in paper. And hands, so many hands, reaching toward her not to grab, but to offer. A mirror, cracked and dark, its surface dripping. "Look," the boy said. She shook her head, but the mirror pulled her anyway. In it, she saw herself, at first. Then her face began to change. Her eyes went black, her skin grayed, her mouth stitched shut, her reflection smiled. Behind her, the crowd whispered in glee, "Now you belong." The world blinked again. Mara stood beneath the tree. The boy was gone. She stepped forward like sleepwalking, raised her hand and touched the bark. It opened like a wound, and she walked inside. People pass by Pine Hollow now and then, always quickly, always with a thopping. But sometimes, on certain nights, travelers go missing. Sometimes a driver says they saw someone on the road just before dusk, a girl with wide eyes, mouth sewn tight, pointing toward the town behind her, begging them to follow. And if they do, they vanish too, because Pine Hollow feeds, and now so does Mara.
Story number 6.
The train was empty when it left the station at 12:47 a.m. The last line of the night, the one that ran past the city outskirts into the old industrial districts where the factories had long since gone quiet. Mason had taken it a dozen times before. He worked the late shift at the Mercy General ER, and he liked the quiet. No drunks, no kids, just hum and motion. But this night was different. The doors slid shut with a sound sharper than usual, like a hiss through teeth. The lights flickered once, twice. Then the train began to move. Mason leaned his head back against the window, eyes half closed, earbuds in. 3 stops in, he realized something was off. There was no conductor, no automated announcements, no lighted maps. He checked his phone, no service. Then he saw the girl. She sat 3 rows down, straight-backed, wearing a black school uniform. Her face was pale, too pale, like paper that had been soaked and dried. Her eyes met his, and she didn't blink. She smiled, and Mason felt a bolt of cold spike through his chest. He looked away, heart thudding. When he looked back, she was gone. The train passed another station without stopping. He stood, staggered to the door, and pounded the emergency intercom. Nothing, just static. Outside, the world had changed. No buildings, no streetlights, just open black. The windows reflected nothing. He returned to his seat, knuckles white around the metal pole. Then the lights flickered, and the others were there. Passengers, dozens of them. They filled the car in total silence, but they weren't right. Each of them sat stiffly unmoving. Some wore modern clothes, others looked like they'd stepped out of old photos, suits from the 40s, dresses yellowed with age. Their skin was wrong, translucent, veined, like wax left too long in the sun. Mason backed away, breathing shallow. Then, one by one, they turned toward him. Their mouths opened in unison, not to scream, not to speak, to gasp. A choking, rattling inhale that dragged the air from the room. Mason fell to his knees, vision swimming, the sound like wind being sucked from a grave. Then the girl returned. She walked calmly between the frozen passengers, eyes locked on him. "Where are we going?" Mason whispered, barely able to speak. She tilted her head. "We're going back." "To where?" Her smile grew. "To where you left them." 20 years ago, Mason had been a child. His mother, single and desperate, had taken the same train one winter night, begging him not to fall asleep. He had, and when he woke up, she was gone. No one ever found her. The train had returned to the depot empty. They said she'd jumped, but Mason remembered a figure in black, a girl, smiling. He had blocked it out, until now. The lights dimmed. The train slowed. Outside, a platform appeared, lit by burning lamps that had no fire. It was overgrown with vines, and a sign above it read, Hollow's End, in rusted iron. The passengers stood in unison. Mason tried to stay seated. The girl extended her hand. You belong here, she said. You always have. He shook his head. No. You left her behind. We don't forget. The door slid open. Cold air rushed in. Beyond the platform, darkness waited. Alive! And from the shadows stepped his mother. Her face was hollow, her eyes empty. But she reached for him. Mason, she whispered, a sound like wind through bones. I didn't mean to, he cried. But it didn't matter. He was already standing, already walking toward the door. The girl watched him go. She always did, because the train always returns for those who forget, and it always leaves with one more passenger.
The next morning,
The train rolled into the last station empty, except for a phone still playing soft music from earbuds, and a single message scratched into the condensation of the window. He rode too far.
Story number 7.
It started with the sound of a second heartbeat. Jenna first heard it while lying in bed, late one night after moving into her new apartment. At first, she thought it was her own pulse echoing in her ears. Too much caffeine, maybe. But the longer she lay there, the clearer it became. Her own heart thudded in her chest. But something else beat slower, heavier, and it was coming from under the floorboards. The apartment was cheap, tucked into the top floor of an old brick building that should have been condemned. But the landlord was eager, the rent suspiciously low, and Jenna was broke. So she ignored the creaks, the water stains that looked too much like faces, and the closet door that wouldn't stay shut. The next night, the heartbeat came again. Slower, closer. She got out of bed, pressed her ear to the floor. Thump, 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 like someone pacing below, barefoot on wood. The problem? There was no apartment beneath hers. Just the old attic, sealed since the fire in 1962. She told herself it was old pipes, bad wiring, maybe an animal. But when she tried to sleep again, she heard something else. Whispering. It wasn't in English. It wasn't even a language she could place. Just syllables whispered in loops, soft as breath, always from beneath the bed. She stopped sleeping. By the 5th night, she was hallucinating, or so she thought. The closet door opened on its own, and when she closed it again, there were scratch marks on the inside. Deep, ragged, claw marks. She called the landlord. He didn't answer. She went down to his office. It was empty, abandoned. Dust everywhere, mail piled under the door dated back 5 years. There was no landlord. She called the city. The line went dead after she gave her address. Something was wrong with this building. She packed a bag, decided to leave, but when she tried to exit, the stairwell led back up. She took the elevator. It only opened to her floor. The windows wouldn't break. The walls wouldn't open. It was as if the building had swallowed her whole. That night, she tried something different. She left her phone recording by the bed. At 3:33 a.m., the screen lit up. The video showed her sleeping. Then, movement. A shape emerged from the closet, crawling, backward, its joints bent the wrong way, its head twitching with every beat of that second heart. It stopped beside her bed, watched her, then leaned close to the phone, its mouth opened wide, and it spoke. She dreams the door. Let her wake it. The next morning, Jenna smashed the phone. She tore open the closet. Inside was a ladder, leading down into the floorboards. She stood there, staring into the dark, a draft brushing her face that smelled like old blood and wet earth. She should have left it alone. She didn't. The attic was cold, not dusty, not abandoned. It was clean. And in the center sat a cradle, old, blackened, rocking slowly. Inside was a bundle of rags, no baby, just something moving. She stepped forward. Something in her head screamed to stop. She reached out anyway. The moment she touched the cloth, the lights went out, and the walls began to breathe. The entire room pulsed with that second heartbeat. She turned to run, but hands were already reaching out of the walls, dozens of them, all gray, all human, all wrong. They didn't grab her. They pushed her back to the cradle, where the rags were falling away, and something beneath them opened its eyes. They were her eyes, but black and hollow and filled with hate. The creature whispered with her voice, "You dreamed me. You made me. You are mine now." She screamed as the floor opened and swallowed her. They say no one lives in apartment 6B. No one has for years. But neighbors report sounds from above, footsteps, thumping, soft crying. And sometimes, if you stand in the hallway late at night, you can hear a second heartbeat echoing through the walls. Some say it's the pipes. Others say it's just the building settling. But if you ever pass by the closet inside that apartment, don't open it, because she's still down there, dreaming. And one night she might dream of you.
Story number 8.
There was a house in the woods that didn't exist on any map. No road led to it. No mailbox marked its number. It just appeared. And once you saw it, it never unsaw you. That's what happened to Adam and Lila. A weekend hiking trip. A wrong turn. By dusk, they were hopelessly off trail and arguing by flashlight. Then Lila saw it through the trees. 3 stories tall, pale siding like dead skin, windows black as oil. No lights, no sound, but it looked cared for. "We can rest here," she said. "Maybe someone has a phone." Adam hesitated. His stomach twisted just looking at it. Something about the door. It was open, but only a crack, like it had been expecting them. Still, they were tired, cold, and lost. They went in. The house smelled like cinnamon. Not warmth, something sickly sweet, like perfume left on a corpse. The floors creaked underfoot, but not with age. More like breath. "I don't think anyone lives here," Adam whispered. Lila didn't answer. She was staring down the hallway. "All the pictures," she said, "they're blank." Every frame on the wall was filled with pure black, not like empty glass like they'd been painted over. Or maybe like they were waiting to develop. They should have left. But Lila's phone lit up. "Full bars. I've got service," she said. That's when the door slammed shut. The windows fogged over. The hallway lights clicked off one by one until they were swallowed by darkness. And then the whispers started. Not words. Breaths. Ragged. Wet. Right behind their ears. Adam grabbed Lila's hand. Upstairs. Maybe a way out. They climbed the staircase, each step groaning louder than the last. When they reached the second floor, the hallway stretched too far. Longer than the house should allow. "There's something wrong," Adam muttered. Then they heard the footsteps behind them. Heavy, dragging, not running, just following. A bedroom door creaked open ahead. They darted in, slammed it shut, and pushed a dresser in front of it. Then they turned and saw the mirror. Floor length, ornate, too clean. In it, they saw the room, but not themselves. Only a girl standing in the corner. Long black hair, face hidden, skin pale and swollen, and slowly she turned toward the glass. Her face was wrong. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin and blood running down her cheeks. She raised a hand, and the mirror cracked. Lila screamed. The lights blew out. The air filled with a sound like hundreds of flies buzzing against glass. And then silence. When Adam opened his eyes, he was alone. No sign of Lila. Only the mirror, now whole again. But this time, he was in it. And behind him, the girl. Adam was found 3 days later, staggering through the woods, clothes torn, mouth sewn shut, eyes wide open. Lila was never found, but hikers say if you walk far enough off trail in that forest, you'll see the house. And if you go inside, it lets you leave. Just one of you. The other stays. To keep the mirror company. And sometimes, on cold nights, the glass fogs up and a handprint appears from the inside.
Story number 9.
When Elias took the security job at the Ravenmore Library, he didn't ask questions. It paid well. Too well for overnight shifts guarding a place that no one visited anymore. "Just stay in the East Wing," the old man said during orientation. "And whatever you do, don't go into the basement." That should have been the warning he heeded. But money talks. Elias nodded, signed the papers, and clocked in at midnight. The library was beautiful, in that crumbling Victorian way. Stained glass windows, massive arched ceilings, the smell of old wood and older pages. Even the silence had weight, like the building remembered everything. The first night was easy. He sat at the desk, flipped through a paperback, drank cold coffee, and ignored the draft that made the chandeliers sway even when there was no wind. But the second night, he noticed something. Books moved on their own. He'd shelved something during a patrol, only to find it lying open on a table minutes later, its pages stuck on the same passage. The silence is not empty. It is waiting. Then the lights began flickering, and then the whispering. It came from the vents, the corners, the walls. At first he thought it was the wind until it said his name. Elias. Soft and wrong, like someone trying to wear a human voice. By the fourth night, he brought a flashlight and a crucifix. By the fifth, he stopped leaving the East Wing. But on the sixth night, everything changed. At 2:06 a.m., the lights shut off completely. Then the desk phone rang. He stared at it. No one ever called. He picked it up. All he heard was breathing. And then a second voice, faint and terrified. Help me. It's still down here. The call ended. The line went dead. The basement door was open. He stood at the top of the stairs for a long time, staring down into that impossible dark. The air was thicker there, still and wet like pond water. But the voice, it sounded real. Human. He went down. Each step creaked louder than it should have until the sound became rhythmic. Creak, creak, like footsteps in perfect time with his own, but not his. He reached the basement floor. It wasn't a storage room. It was a chamber, circular. Stone walls lined with books bound in skin. A single wooden chair sat in the center, and strapped to it was a man, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut with wire, still alive, still breathing. Elias backed away, then heard the door slam shut above him. Footsteps descended, but no one came down. The lights overhead flickered on, and for the first time Elias saw the floor, etched with symbols, some moving, shifting like worms under skin. He turned toward the bound man, but it wasn't a man anymore. It had no eyes. Its mouth was unsuing itself, and it smiled. You answered, it said, and all the books opened at once. Pages fluttered like wings. Screams rose from them. Thousands of voices, all trapped, all reading themselves. And from the shadows stepped the librarian, 8 feet tall, skin like burnt paper, no mouth, just ink-stained hands. It raised one finger, pointed to Elias. You're overdue. They found his badge by the door the next morning. Nothing else. The basement was sealed, no signs of forced entry, no power outage, no calls logged. The library has a new night guard now. She's lasted 3 days. Last night she heard whispering through the walls, and this morning on her desk was a book that hadn't been there before. No title, only one line on the open page. Elias Hart, page 1.
Story number 10.
The last voicemail Maya ever received from her sister said only one thing. He's under my skin. Don't come here. Don't. Then silence. A low click, and the line went dead. That was 2 weeks ago. The police searched her sister's apartment in Shadewood Towers. No signs of struggle, but the place felt wrong. The air was damp, heavy, almost humid, walls sweating in places. They chalked it up to bad insulation. Maya didn't buy it. Her sister, Kay, was smart, paranoid even. She wouldn't vanish without a fight. So Maya ignored the warnings. She packed a bag and drove to Shadewood herself. The moment she stepped inside, the building greeted her like a corpse left in the sun. The lobby smelled of mold and old copper. Lights flickered overhead even though the bulbs were new. The front desk was empty. No manager, no staff. The elevator door opened before she pressed the button. Inside, etched into the back wall in deep claw marks, "Skin isn't yours forever." She took the stairs. Kay's apartment, 404, was locked. Maya picked it. Her sister had taught her how back in college. The moment the door creaked open, the scent hit her. Not rot, not quite. Something alive, like wet meat in the sun. The walls had dark stains, pulsing faintly as though something beneath them was breathing. Kay's laptop was still open on the counter. A document sat unsaved, its text only a few scattered words. He wore me. He watched through my eyes. I was inside when he used my hands. Then tap, tap, tap from the bathroom. Maya opened the door slowly. At first, she didn't see anything. Then she looked at the mirror. It was smeared with bloody fingerprints, and written in red backwards were the words, "Don't look in the tub." So of course she looked, and inside was Kay's skin. Just the skin, empty like a shed suit. No blood, no bones, just perfectly hollow. And its face, Kay's face, was turned toward her, mouth frozen in a scream. Maya stumbled back, slipped, cracked her shoulder against the doorframe. From the other room, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voicemail. She played it. Static. Then her own voice. "I told you not to come here." She dropped the phone. It wasn't her voice. It was Kay's, wearing her voice. Then the whispering started, from behind the walls, all around her. 1,000 voices muttering in unison. He takes what fits. He sheds what breaks. Skin remembers. She ran, but the door wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't break. The walls began to peel. And behind them, she saw faces, pushing forward, mouths open wide, eyes rolling, skinless. Her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. "You're next. He likes your fit." The bathroom door creaked behind her, and Kay stood there, smiling, but her skin was gone, all muscle and sinew, red and gleaming, yet somehow still smiling, still recognizable. She spoke with no lips. "It wears better when it's fresh." Then she lunged. When the neighbors finally reported the smell, the apartment was empty, no body. Only a hollowed-out skin lying in the bathtub. This one had Maya's face. her smile, perfectly preserved. The phone on the floor kept buzzing, though the battery had long since died. The latest message? Just breathing, and a voice whispering, "You'll fit too."